Have you ever wondered how stress can affect your focus, your attention, and affecting your brain ultimately? Well, let's go ahead and dive into that right after this intro. Welcome back to My Optimal Mind, and welcome you new Optimal Mind performers. Today we're going to be talking about how stress can affect your brain, but ultimately how does it affect your focus? So let's kind of dive in that right now. But before I get started, if you are looking to have better focus, better attention, and more energy and be more productive, have more productive mind, and a better performing mind, then you should check out my free training. It's in the description below that actually goes over my proprietary process of helping my clients and my patients to have better focus and attention so they can have an optimal mind. All right, so let's go in and dive in a little bit sciencey here as far as how stress or having anxiety affects your brain and ultimately affects your focus. So the very first thing is looking at neurotransmitter levels. I know I talk about this a lot because it has a lot to do with our brain chemistry. It's what ultimately is a way to kind of measure things and seeing what's going on in our brain. Now, if you are having high levels of stress, there could be several different types of neurotransmitters that could be out of balance. But let's talk about a few of the most obvious ones. Now, if you're somebody that's very paranoid, there's very high chances that your dopamine levels are actually too high. Whereas people who tend to have ADHD or depression can have low dopamine levels, but that's not the case for every person that has ADHD. You can have very high levels of dopamine where you're more paranoid, and it could be a state in your life where maybe it's happening recently where you're more paranoid and you're very agitated, and having high levels of dopamine really hinders on your concentration and focus because you're having high levels of dopamine that you're more paranoid than actually be able to concentrate and focus on things. The other thing is also looking at norepinephrine and epinephrine, two other neurotransmitters and hormones that has to deal with regulating with our stress a lot. And when those levels are too high, again, you feel more agitated. You tend to be more on edge, have more anxiety. And when you are more like that, the brain have a hard time to focus and concentrate on things when those levels are too high. So you might be asking, okay, how can we lower those down? Well, there's a lot of different stress techniques as far as nutrients to implement. Usually L-theanine is a calming, 5-HTP can be, but it really depends on where there's imbalances going on there. We're not going to be diving into that today, but if you are interested of me going more in depth as far as how can you reduce those levels of norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine, then go ahead and leave that in the comment section below. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about as far as what could be also a big problem when it comes to stress affecting your focus and attention is that the second thing that can be really a big problem is having too high levels of cortisol. Cortisol is mainly looked at as our energy, but it also does deal with helping with our focus. And when we have too high levels of cortisol, it kind of goes inside with basically having high levels of epinephrine and norepinephrine. It's what our adrenals produce, is what I call is stage 2 of adrenal, inefficiency. So what happens is that you're having too high levels of cortisol and you're constantly having high levels of cortisol, and you need to be taking something to manage that cortisol levels. Because when you're having that too high of cortisol levels, again, you can't concentrate, you can't focus, because having too high or too low of anything, your brain's going to have a hard time focusing or concentrating. So you always want to be in that middle. Now, the third thing is when you reach stage 3 of adrenal insufficiency. It's when you've basically reached burnt out, where you are not producing enough cortisol. So you're kind of going the opposite. You've kind of burnt out all the juices in your system. And when you're at that point, you have low energy. And of course, as you know, having low energy contributes to have a harder time to concentrate, to have mental power, basically have mental fatigue when you have low cortisol levels. So both situations are not good to have high and low. Same with norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine. If you have too high, you can also reach to a point where burnout, where then you have too low. And in most cases, for people with ADHD and depression, they're going to have low, but they can also have a combination of anxiety and ADHD where they might hit both, or they might be in a state in their life where they're hitting too high and then they reach burnout and they have low levels of dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and cortisol. So these are things that you need to keep in mind, that these things that you can test for is something that I test for with my clients and my patients to see where they're at, because treatment protocol is very different when it comes to if you're low or high. Now, if you're interested in me talking more about the treatment options as far as when it comes to having too low of all those different neurotransmitters or too high, I can talk more about that in future videos, and you can put that in the description below in the comment section. But if you're looking for further guidance on having better focus and attention, I have a free training in the description below that goes over my proprietary process, helping my clients and patients have better focus and attention and have an optimal mind. So this is Dr. Legrand signing out, and remember, you have an optimal mind. Thanks. Bye.